From its earliest days, Hollywood has turned to novels for its stories. More than 3/4 of the Best Picture Oscars have gone to book adaptations, including last year's The English Patient. Joining me now, three distinguished writers who have all had experience with the Hollywood system. Kurt Vonnegut, who has seen his work, including Slaughterhouse-Five and Mother Night, adapted to film. Bruce J. Friedman, who wrote the book that became the Steve Martin movie, The Lonely Guy. And Dan Wakefield, who after 27 years has finally seen his Going All the Way adapted to film. I am pleased to have all of them here. Now, here's what I want to know at the beginning. A young novelist, somebody who's written a book that's attracted some attention, comes to you and says, Hollywood wants my book. What advice do you give him?
Well, you take the money and run, because this is a capitalist society. In order to stay in business, you need a big whack of money, and that's one way to get it. So sure, take it. And Salinger is famous for saying he would never do business with Hollywood again because. Which one was it?
My Foolish Heart.
It was the story Uncle Wiggily in Connecticut.
Well, he was so offended that he would have nothing more to do with Hollywood, which is ridiculous. The movie's very separate from what I do. In fact, you guys are both script writers, and I'm not.
I beg your pardon.
Aren't you?
Occasionally, I've been caught doing that.
What's your advice?
But pretty much the same. You know, I keep hearing about people who say that Hollywood really messed up my movie, and I always ask the same question: Did you give the money back? You know? So yeah, it's the luck of the draw. If you can get lucky and have an. I've had improvements made in some of my work. And others have been, rape in broad daylight. Yeah. It's the luck of the draw.
Well, Michael Ondaccio on this program sat where Kurt is saying and said the movie was every bit as good as the book, even though different. Yeah. I was very pleased with the movie, The English Patient, as much as I was with my book. So
well,
it can happen.
That is actually my experience, too. I'm quite satisfied with what Hollywood has done with Slaughterhouse-Five and with Mother Night. No complaints at all.
Yeah. You've got some complaints. I mean, they did not do well with starting over.
Well, I was completely shut out of that, and the movie had nothing to do with the novel. They used the characters' same names, and to see the movie, I had to go stand in line and pay $7 or whatever, and I feel like Going All the Way is my karmic reward. It's exactly the opposite. I got to write the script. I was involved in the process from the beginning to the end, and I love the movie.
Why was it different?
Well, because two young men came to me, a director named Mark Pellington, and said, I love this novel. He said, I read it in high school because my dad had it, and I saw it had something to do with sex and young people. And so I read it, and he said, it's the movie I always wanted to do when I became a movie director. And this is his first feature. And he said, we want to keep it in the 1950s, which the novel is set. We want you to write the script, and we want to shoot it in Indianapolis. And nobody else had ever said that to me. You'd think that would be kind of an obvious thing, but it had been optioned 4 times in the past. People wanted to update it. They wanted to set it in L.A. They wanted to do all this stuff, none of which would work. So it was worth waiting 27 years for this young guy, Mark Pellington, who came out of MTV, to do this movie.
You have actually a theory that I've read, which is that the smaller the filmmaker, the smaller the amount of money that is sort of at stake, the more likely they're to be devoted to the book itself.
Yes. Yeah. No, well, this is to have somebody enthusiastic about making a movie, determined to make the movie. That was true of Bob Whitey and Keith Gordon, who made Mother Night and persuaded Nick Nolte to take the lead. And, it was a most agreeable experience.
If they came to you and said, we want Mother Night, we got Nick Nolte to star, but you have to write the screenplay, would you say no?
Well, that would be like you have to become a pole vaulter. It's because, no, I can't write scripts. And in lectures, I invite people in the audience to say, name people who were both first-rate novelists and first-rate dramatists.
I'll name
a couple. And there are very few.
Faulkner.
Well,
Bruce Friedman.
Bruce
No,
Friedman.
I don't
Right.
know about that.
Tell me what's different about writing screenplays than writing novels. I mean, why is it difficult? Why wouldn't it be a natural transfer, a natural leap to go from your own novel where you know the characters simply to adapting to a new form?
Well, I was born in 1922, so I call myself, and Mailer and Irwin Shaw and so forth, people born with close to 1922. We're the last American male novelists to respond to other novels rather than to film and to write books. As when I started out, I was writing a work of art which was to exist only as a book, and not anticipating a movie.
Well, I have to tell you, as you know, I was born in 1932,
Yeah.
and I certainly was writing books and references to books, and some of them in references to yours.
I don't think I've never written a novel with the screen in mind.
No,
You know,
no.
once in a while it'll happen, or a short story, and you get lucky and the movies bounce on it.
Well,
But-
the thing that was lucky for me in this script was that it was, like you say, it was an easy transition because Mark Pellington, the director, wanted to make the book into the movie. And when I first met with him, I started out trying to be a hip guy. I said, well, you know, we can take this out and take that out, you know, and he says, no, leave that in. I love that. So suddenly, like, I realized we're really making the book of the movie, and that is extremely rare.
There's a woman, a pretty smart producer that I met, made a remark that stuck with me, and she said, if you have an idiosyncratic style or a clear signature, the chances are you will not succeed as a screenwriter in Hollywood. You're better off just having a generic style, and it makes sense.
Well,
really.
but also when we say in Hollywood, it's again, going always a very low-budget movie. I don't think it could have ever survived the Hollywood big studio system.
It wouldn't have been as good
No,
because they would have
no.
started throwing money
And the
at it.
same with Kurt's movies. The same with Mother Night. Yeah.
You've had more experience than anybody writing screenplays.
Well, I have to admit it. I hate to admit it, but probably I never.
No, do you hate to admit it, really?
Yeah, I'm a little. I never got the hang of it. I was never a comfortable fit in Hollywood somehow, and I had some pictures that worked out well.
Splash.
Yeah, would be one. Stir Crazy. The best experience I ever had was a short story I wrote, which was turned into The Heartbreak Kid, and that was an absolutely perfect experience because I didn't have to do anything.
God, what a movie.
I didn't have to do a thing,
yeah.
you know, and they improved on anything I could have written.
Who made the film?
Well, that was Neil Simon. I don't know.
He did
if
the-
you're allowed to- I don't know him well enough.
Yeah, I know.
My adapter.
Yeah.
He adapted it. Elaine May directed it.
And Grodin and Sybil Shepherd starred.
Yeah.
What a
And that
great
was a
movie, yeah.
wonderful experience because I didn't have to do anything.
Now, you left writing screenplays because you were worried that you were becoming too comfortable and you were losing a sense of what it is you wanted to do.
Pretty much, yeah. I was a little late in the game, but about 6 or 7 years ago, I started to get. I was making too much money. It always makes me uncomfortable. And yeah,
I'd love to be able to hear myself say that.
Yeah, I was. As a matter of fact, I wanted to, you know, do some writing that was more personal, and so I said goodbye to it about 6 or 7 years ago.
Didn't some guy tell you you would never be anything?
No, I know the story you mean.
What's the story?
Well, Kurt loves a story in which Ray Stark years ago was trying to think of a way to insult me for some reason, because I'm a writer. And he couldn't think, but he thought, and he said, you know, you're in trouble, and this was 20 years, you're always going to be one of those $100,000 guys. That's And, you know, I thought of my father bringing us up on $30 a week in a tiny Bronx apartment, and he walked off, you know, as if he, you know,
He insulted you with
yeah.
the most ultimate sort of put down.
Here's my story. I'm still trying to get to be one of those $100,000 guys. If you do a low-budget movie, you're not in that range yet.
Well, you know, I've got a kid who got $600,000 for a movie idea. They have no
Idea.
Yeah, they have no sense of scale out there. They don't know what is a lot of money, and they don't know what a little money is.
What amazes me about the process, and we've had lots of directors on this program, is that it's pretty much accepted that they're going to have 7 or 8 writers get involved in the script at one time or another. They'll start with somebody, they don't like it, so they go to someone else, they don't like that, they go to someone else. And in the end, it's about 8 names.
Well, there's a convention of all the people who've written, who did some writing on Tootsie. They meet every year.
Oh, that's right.
Fill an entire hall. I'm the only one who
But
doesn't show
that's
up.
what's different about, and that's why I think independent movies have a better shot of making sense. You know, because these guys, first of all, they couldn't have afforded 7 or 8 writers. They're stuck with me. That's the only thing they've got. And you know, it's like this experience was the opposite of John Gregory Dunn and his book Monster. You know, where I think Up Close and Personal had 28 drafts and 7 or 8 different writers. You know, and when it came out, I wrote him a postcard. I said, I love your book, Monster. I said, reading it made me almost grateful to be poor. Because, you know, doing that Hollywood system, you get a lot of money, but then it ends.
I had a play called Happy Birthday, Wanda June,
Yeah.
which was with Kevin McCarthy and Marcia Mason, who was nobody then, and Diane Wiest. And God, we were running fine down in the village, and they got like the Harlem Globetrotters. There's just such great ensemble actors. And then Hollywood bought the thing, and they got Rod Steiger to replace Kevin McCarthy. They got Susanna York to replace Marcia Mason, and God, it did not work at all. And I had forgotten about that. Yes, I had a movie made of something of mine, and I had just blanked it out.
Just take The English Patient. Did you all read the book or not? Did anybody read the book?
I saw the movie.
You like the movie?
Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah, I mean, because it really was an example of a book that
Well, he got to
that
write
the author says.
But he wrote
love
the
the book.
screenplay. He got to write the screenplay. He wanted to write the screenplay.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big question. Do you want to write the screenplay? I have no interest.
Knowing that it has
in-
to be different.
Pardon?
Knowing that it has to be different to some extent, because if this, just simply the number of pages would fill 3 hours
Right.
of.
I mean,
Yeah.
the painful part of that was cutting out even stuff that we had filmed, which, because the rough cut was 3 hours and 15 minutes, and you got to get under 2 hours, so we had to cut.
You were very well served.
Oh, yeah.
And in spite of that, I think the book is somehow funnier because you don't get there's no way to get that interior process of the guy's mind. It's probably more moving. But
on the other hand, I think there are things the people in the movie did which are better than
I
the
agree with
novel.
that. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
there's touches like Rose McGowan, who is the dream girl of the guy who's the nerd, and when she meets him and says, "What's your favorite sport?" He says, "Basketball." She says, "Mine too." And she reaches over and gives him this little touch. You know, it's just devastating. You think, "Oh my God, the guy's blown away." You know, that wasn't in the book, but her gesture.
Right.
You know, those little things that actors bring.
The
to
actor's
us.
craft. You went out to Sundance. You wrote a piece
Yes.
about this in GQ.
Yeah.
That was a good experience for you?
It turned out to be because our movie was bought. And but I got to tell you, the 2 or 3 days before we knew it was bought, I had my first mail-ox since I lived in Hollywood, literally. You know, it was very tense. And the first night we were screened, there were other parties and goings-on and premieres, and some people left with, "Oh my God, what's going on?" So the great relief, A, was when we were bought by Gramercy, which is one of the top distributors, and B, we had a screening in Salt Lake City, which was called "That's for Real People" rather than Hollywood people, and they laughed and cheered and did all the right stuff, and we were fabulously relieved.
Here's a clip from Going All the Way. Take a look at this. Well, we like that movie we've seen, don't we?
Did he study your mannerisms?
Well, actually, the 2 actors, Ben Affleck and Jeremy Davies, came out before the shooting. Mark Pelling had wanted them to hang out with me and a friend of mine who was like the model of the character Gunner, a guy I went to high school with named Ted Steeg. And the 4 of us hung out, and we told them stories of when we were in high school and took them to the Red Key Tavern and places we'd been to. So they they watched us and got our mannerisms and the whole thing. Yeah.
Eerie.
Yeah.
What do you think would make it hard to write a screenplay?
I think if you had to write something, for instance, if they had wanted to make that novel, which is set in 1954, if they said you have to update it to the 90s, that would have really been hard.
Because that's not what you know.
And I'd have been betraying the story. You know, I think it would be hard if you had to write something to order that you didn't believe in. that you felt was just some hokum that somebody had told you to do, and you didn't have your heart in it? Or...
But there are people who can do this.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And
A producer comes to you and has a dream and says, here's my dream, and you fill in the blanks. It's impossible. You have to fail.
Yeah.
Oh, you do. You couldn't do that.
You have to fail. How can I get your dream and put it on paper? If he's a smart producer and you come up with something good but different, he'll accept that. But you can't reproduce this thing he's been walking around. You know, and it's an awful experience, it seems to me. You have to fail. So you bring in 16 more writers.
Is anything you've written that you would want to write the screenplay for?
I just don't think I can do it. Again, it seems to me like a doctor practicing law or whatever.
But aren't you tempted to try?
No, I'm perfectly content with the book form. I am tempted by plays, which are different from film. Yeah. But most novelists don't realize that drama is dance, that the people have to move. And so they have them talking all the time.
Yeah. You know, Kurt, I think one of the things that you feel that way is that you said you were born in 1922, and in the 50s, like when I got out of college, the idea, I didn't know anybody who wanted to write a movie. That was kind of low class, you know, like you would be looked down on as a writer.
You know anybody who doesn't want to write a movie now?
And now, the guys, the same kids now who come out of college who would have been the guys wanting to write novels now want to do movies or direct movies. It's a whole other,
and should,
exactly.
Because the technology has changed radically.
Right.
So that you can tell a story better?
Oh, I don't, without doubt, with actors and music and...
But if that's true, you still don't write for a visual audience, do you?
No, because I can't. Well, what I've said is that a novel used to be an important form of entertainment, particularly in northern climates where there was nothing else to do in the wintertime, and so it was worthwhile learning to decode 26 phonetic symbols, 10 numbers, and 8 punctuation marks and idiosyncratic arrangements in lines. People learned how to do this, which is like learning how to play the French horn, because it was the only way they could get entertained in the wintertime, and that's all over with now. It's not necessary.
I often wonder if we were 21 now, and you know, our heroes were once Faulkner and Fitzgerald and Hemingway and James Jones. Would we now embark on screenwriting careers? I wonder. I have no way of knowing. I like to think not. But you know, the writers we admire, Catcher in the Rye, Evil and War, we're not admiring the events of the novel so much. The events of Catcher in the Rye are, I shouldn't use the word routine, but they're not astonishing. It's the sensibility, it's the line-by-line sense. This is virtually impossible to transfer to the screen, I think. You know?
Well, I was asked one time to adapt The French Lieutenant's Woman for a movie, and so I said, okay, and absolutely nothing happens. And I finally had to give up because
but
it eventually was made into a movie with Meryl Streep.
Here are you two guys whose work I love, and you're saying this, you know, that it couldn't be that somebody, a writer, serious writer, could write screenplays. But the reason that I love doing this, for one thing, I don't think visually either, but I sat there with Mark Pellington, who does think visually, and it was fun. You know, it was a real, one of those collaborations that are fun, that to be able to do that.
I think it depends a lot on the director.
Absolutely.
And how much that director loves writing, and how much that director knows and cares about the writer in the book.
And doesn't consider himself a writer.
Right,
That's
exactly.
But
the reason that Kurt's novels have been done, I think, so honorably as movies like Mother Night and Slaughter is because the directors they did those because they respected his work. They weren't out to change him. They wanted to bring him to a
Well, do you is that what you think? That it was the director respected the work, or was there something about what you write that is adaptable to movies?
Well, it's like having a beautiful girl love you. She loves me. There are people who
love you.
really love the book.
All right. Thank you all. A pleasure to you all.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.